The conference room felt like a death chamber as I sat across from my boss, Rebecca Martinez, my trembling hands clutching the ultrasound photo that would soon become my execution warrant. After 6 brutal years of selling my soul to this company, 6 years of bleeding myself dry while they feasted on my dedication, 6 years of sacrificing every precious moment with family to build their twisted dream, I was about to share the most sacred news of my life. I expected celebration, congratulations, maybe even basic human decency. What I got instead was a savage masterclass in corporate butchery that would ignite a fire of vengeance they never saw coming. My name is Nia Thompson, and this is the story of how pregnancy discrimination transformed me into the most lethal predator my former employer never imagined possible. I had bled for Zenith Marketing Solutions since they were pathetic nobodies, sharing a cramped hellhole above a coffee shop. I watched them claw their way from desperate beggars scrambling for 3-figure scraps to corporate parasites landing 6-figure prey. I wasn't just some disposable employee watching from the sidelines. I was the architect of their success, the senior project manager who transformed their chaotic disaster into a profit-generating machine. When I started at Zenith, I was a fresh college graduate with boundless enthusiasm that they would soon crush into dust. Rebecca, the founder and CEO, was only 5 years older but carried herself like she had already conquered the world. She promised me that if I worked hard and stayed loyal, I would grow with the company and eventually become a partner. For 6 torturous years, I believed that lie. I believed in her poisonous vision, in the company culture she claimed to be building, in the family atmosphere that was nothing but a cruel joke. I poured my heart, soul, and every drop of blood into making Zenith successful. When clients had impossible deadlines, I worked through the night until my eyes burned and my body screamed. When difficult customers threatened to leave, I personally managed their accounts until they were satisfied, even when it meant destroying my own well-being. I had never taken a single sick day in 6 years. Not one. When I had the flu, I worked from home with a fever of 102 degrees, my body writhing in agony. When I broke my wrist in a skiing accident, I learned to type with one hand rather than miss a project deadline, the pain shooting through my arm with every keystroke. When my beloved grandmother passed away, I attended her funeral on a Saturday morning, and was back in the office Monday morning, as if my heart hadn't been ripped from my chest. My performance reviews were flawless. Rebecca herself had written in my last evaluation that I was irreplaceable, and the backbone of our project management division. Clients worshipped me, regularly requesting me by name for their campaigns. Several had told Rebecca directly that they stayed with Zenith specifically because of the service I provided. I had built relationships, delivered miraculous results, and generated millions of dollars in revenue for the company. So when I discovered I was pregnant after 2 agonizing years of trying to conceive with my husband David, I thought my bosses would be thrilled for me. We had always talked about work-life balance, about supporting each other through major life events, about being more than just colleagues but actually being a family. I genuinely believed they would celebrate this milestone with me and work together to ensure a smooth transition during my maternity leave. I was about to learn just how viciously wrong I was. I scheduled the meeting with Rebecca for a Wednesday morning, choosing a time when the office was typically calm, and she wouldn't be rushed or distracted. I had practiced what I wanted to say, had researched the company's maternity leave policies, and had even prepared a preliminary plan for how my responsibilities could be covered while I was away. "Rebecca," I began, my voice slightly shaking with excitement, "I have some wonderful news to share with you. David and I are expecting our first child." I will never forget the look that crossed her face in that moment. A look so cold and calculating it made my blood freeze. For just a split second, her professional mask shattered, and I saw something predatory and vicious flash in her eyes before she quickly replaced it with the most fake smile I had ever witnessed. "Oh, Nia," she said, her voice dripping with false enthusiasm that made my skin crawl. "That is such wonderful news. Congratulations. I am so happy for you both." But her body language told a completely different story, a story of disgust and betrayal. She leaned back in her chair like I had just announced I had a contagious disease. Her hands moved to her desk, picking up a pen and clicking it repeatedly like she was counting down the seconds until she could destroy me. Most tellingly, She couldn't make eye contact with me for more than a few seconds at a time, as if looking at me made her physically ill. Over the next few days, I threw myself into creating the most detailed transition plan in corporate history, working overtime to ensure a smooth handoff. But while I was killing myself to protect the company I still believed I was part of, Rebecca was apparently working overtime to orchestrate my execution. I began noticing terrifying changes in how I was treated. Meetings were scheduled without me being invited, like I was already dead to them. Decisions about my projects were made without my input, as if my 6 years of expertise meant nothing. Colleagues who had always been friendly started avoiding eye contact and giving me short, cold responses that cut through me like knives. The axe fell exactly 2 weeks after I had shared my pregnancy news. Rebecca called me into her office on a Friday afternoon, accompanied by Janet from HR, a woman I had barely interacted with during my 6 years with the company, but who suddenly seemed very interested in documenting my destruction. "Nia," Rebecca began, her voice taking on the formal tone she typically reserved for firing vendors, "we need to discuss some concerns about your recent performance." My heart plummeted into my stomach like a stone. In 6 years, no one had ever expressed concerns about my performance. My reviews were consistently perfect, my clients were ecstatic, and my projects were delivered flawlessly. What concerns could they possibly have? "I'm not sure I understand," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady as panic flooded my system. "Can you be more specific about what concerns you're referring to?" Rebecca opened a folder that appeared to contain several documents and began reading from what sounded like a prepared execution script. "Over the past few weeks, we've noticed a decline in your attention to detail, some missed deadlines, and feedback from clients about communication issues." Each accusation hit me like a physical blow, like she was taking a sledgehammer to everything I had built. Missed deadlines? I had never missed a deadline in my entire tenure with the company. Communication issues? I had testimonials from clients praising my responsiveness and clarity. Attention to detail? My meticulous documentation was legendary within the company. "This is pregnancy discrimination," I said, standing up from my chair as righteous fury coursed through my veins. "You're firing me because I'm pregnant, and that's illegal. We're terminating your employment due to performance issues," Rebecca repeated mechanically, like she was reading from a script written by demons. "Your pregnancy has nothing to do with this decision." But we all knew the brutal truth. The timing was too obvious, the fabricated performance issues too transparent, the sudden documentation too convenient. They were firing me because they saw my pregnancy as a liability, an inconvenience, a problem to be eliminated rather than accommodated. I walked out of that office in a daze, carrying a cardboard box with 6 years of personal items and professional memories, feeling like I was carrying my own coffin. Colleagues avoided eye contact as I made my way to the elevator, clearly aware of what had just happened but too terrified or embarrassed to acknowledge it. The woman who had helped build their company, who had sacrificed years of her life for their success, was being escorted out like a common criminal. That night, I sat in my kitchen with David, staring at the severance paperwork and trying to process the devastation that had just occurred. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a grief so profound it felt like someone had murdered my soul. In a way, someone had. The naive version of myself who believed that loyalty and hard work were always rewarded had been brutally executed in that conference room. "We should sue them," David said, reading over the termination documents with fury in his eyes. "This is obviously discrimination. You have documentation of your performance, client testimonials, everything we need to destroy them in court." He was right, of course. We had a devastating case for pregnancy discrimination, and any employment attorney would have been happy to take it on contingency. But litigation would take years, would cost a fortune in legal fees, and would ultimately result in what? A settlement that required me to sign a non-disclosure agreement and never speak about their illegal behavior? I wanted something more than money. I wanted justice. I wanted them to understand the magnitude of what they had just done. I wanted consequences that would obliterate everything they had built. "I have a better idea," I told David, my hand instinctively moving to my still flat stomach where our child was growing. "I'm going to start my own company and destroy them." The idea had been forming in my mind during the humiliating walk to my car, crystallizing into a plan during the drive home, and solidifying into deadly determination as I sat in my kitchen processing the betrayal. I knew everything about Zenith's business model, their client needs, their operational weaknesses, and their strategic blind spots. I had spent 6 years learning their industry inside and out, building relationships with their clients, and understanding what made marketing campaigns successful or catastrophically unsuccessful. More importantly, I knew what they were doing wrong. Despite their growth and apparent success, Zenith had fundamental flaws that would be their downfall. They were so focused on rapid expansion that they had neglected the foundation of sustainable business practices. They treated employees as disposable resources rather than valued team members. They overpromised to clients and underdelivered on results. They were vulnerable in ways they didn't even realize. I called my new company Phoenix Creative, a name that perfectly captured the symbolism of rising from the ashes of betrayal and discrimination. The Phoenix is reborn stronger and more magnificent than before, transformed by the very fire that was meant to destroy it. That was going to be my story of revenge. Starting a business while pregnant and unemployed was terrifying in ways I had never imagined. We had some savings, but not nearly enough to sustain us through the months it would take to build a client base and generate revenue while supporting a growing family. But the response to my new venture was explosive and immediate. Within a week, I had 3 small projects from former clients who remembered my work and were desperate to give me a chance as an independent contractor. The projects weren't huge, but they provided enough income to pay our bills and gave me the confidence that Phoenix Creative could not just succeed, it could dominate. My first major breakthrough came 3 months after starting the company, and it was more devastating to Zenith than I could have imagined. One of their biggest clients, a regional restaurant chain called Coastal Eats, reached out to me directly after becoming furious with the service they were receiving. The account manager who had taken over my responsibilities was inexperienced and overwhelmed, and several marketing campaigns had failed spectacularly. "Nia," the marketing director said during our initial phone call, "we know you're not with Zenith anymore, but we've been working with you for 3 years and you understand our brand better than anyone. Would you be interested in taking us on as a client?" This was the moment I had been waiting for. The opportunity to prove that my value as a marketing professional was not tied to the Zenith brand, but was superior to anything they could offer. Coastal Eats wasn't just any client. They represented over $200,000 in annual revenue for Zenith. Losing them would be a crushing blow to my former employer's bottom line. I spent 2 weeks developing a comprehensive marketing strategy that was so innovative and powerful it made Zenith's previous work look like amateur hour. The presentation was a knockout. Coastal Eats signed a year-long contract with Phoenix Creative that was worth more than I had made in salary during my entire final year at Zenith. Word spread like wildfire through the industry that there was a new marketing consultancy delivering mind-blowing results at competitive prices. Every dollar my clients paid was going directly toward delivering results rather than supporting bureaucratic infrastructure and corporate parasites. By the time my daughter Sophia was born, Phoenix Creative had 12 active clients and was generating more revenue per month than I had ever earned as an employee. I had proven to myself and to the industry that my success at Zenith had not been a fluke. It had been the result of my superior talent, dedication, and understanding of what clients actually needed. During those early months with Sophia, I had time to think strategically about the future of Phoenix Creative and my long-term goals for annihilating my former employer. I realized that my initial anger at Zenith had evolved into something more constructive, a determination to build something infinitely better than what they offered. I started hiring other professionals who had been undervalued or brutalized by traditional agencies. Each person I hired brought not only professional skills, but also a burning hunger to prove themselves in an environment that actually valued their contributions. The contrast with Zenith's culture couldn't have been more stark. While I was building a team of motivated professionals who felt valued and supported, my former employer was struggling with high turnover, client dissatisfaction, and the operational chaos that inevitably results from treating employees like garbage. I heard through industry contacts that Rebecca was having difficulty retaining good employees, and that several major clients had expressed fury with the quality of service they were receiving. The account managers who had taken over my responsibilities were overwhelmed and undertrained, leading to missed deadlines, poor communication, and the kind of performance issues that Rebecca had falsely attributed to me during my termination. Our third year brought the kind of explosive growth that startup dreams are made of. Phoenix Creative landed a major contract with a national retail chain, expanded into new service areas, and was recognized by the Regional Business Journal as one of the fastest-growing companies in the city. We were no longer just a successful startup competing with established agencies. We were an established agency ourselves, with the resources and reputation to win major contracts and deliver enterprise-level results. But the most satisfying milestone came when we had the opportunity to acquire TechFlow Solutions, a specialized digital marketing firm that had been one of Zenith's key subcontractors. The acquisition was a strategic masterstroke that would simultaneously expand our capabilities and devastate our former employer's operational capacity. The acquisition meant that Zenith would need to find a new technical partner to replace TechFlow's services, a process that would take months and would inevitably disrupt their existing client relationships. Companies that had been working with Zenith for years would suddenly experience delays, technical glitches, and service interruptions that would make them question their loyalty to the agency. Within 6 weeks of completing the TechFlow acquisition, 2 of Zenith's major clients reached out to Phoenix Creative about potential partnerships. They were frustrated with service disruptions and were looking for an agency that could provide more reliable technical support. Both companies became clients within 2 months, bringing our total annual revenue to over $4 million and establishing Phoenix Creative as a dominant force in the regional marketing industry. The transformation was mind-blowing to witness. In less than 3 years, I had gone from being fired for the crime of getting pregnant to being the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company that was actively demolishing the market position of my former employer. Through industry contacts and former colleagues who still worked there, I heard regular updates about Zenith's declining performance, employee turnover, and client dissatisfaction. Rebecca had apparently tried to address their problems by hiring more middle managers and implementing new policies, but she hadn't addressed the fundamental cultural issues that were driving away both employees and clients. The final nail in Zenith's coffin came during our 4th year in business. One of my former colleagues reached out to me with information that Zenith was in serious financial trouble. They had lost several major clients, were behind on rent payments for their office space, and were struggling to make payroll for their remaining employees. Rebecca was apparently making desperate pitches to investors, trying to raise capital to keep the company afloat. She keeps talking about unfair competition, my former colleague told me during a confidential coffee meeting. She claims that you've been stealing clients and employees through unethical means, but everyone knows that clients are leaving because our service quality has collapsed. The irony was delicious. Rebecca was blaming Phoenix Creative's success for Zenith's failure, when the reality was that their failure was entirely self-inflicted. They had created their own problems through poor management decisions, toxic workplace culture, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what clients actually valued. I never actively tried to destroy Zenith or steal their clients. I simply built a superior company that delivered extraordinary results in a more professional and respectful manner. Their clients left them for the same reason their employees left them, because they could get better service and treatment elsewhere. Zenith Marketing Solutions officially collapsed 6 months later, exactly 4 years after they had fired me for getting pregnant. The irony was not lost on me that they had survived approximately the same amount of time after my departure, as I had worked there before my termination. On the day I learned about Zenith's closure, I sat in my corner office holding Sophia on my lap while she played with her toy blocks. She was almost 4 years old, a bright and curious little girl who had no idea that her existence had once been considered a liability by people who claimed to value family. Phoenix Creative now employed 32 people and generated over $8 million in annual revenue. We had been featured in business magazines as an example of ethical leadership and sustainable growth. Our employees regularly rated us as one of the best places to work in the city. Our clients stayed with us for years because they trusted our expertise and valued our partnership approach. The woman who had fired me for getting pregnant was now unemployed, scrambling to rebuild her career after the spectacular failure of the company she had spent years building. She had reached out to me once, about 6 months after Zenith's closure, with a LinkedIn message that was equal parts apology and job inquiry. I read the message 3 times before deciding not to respond, not out of cruelty or vindictiveness, but because some bridges burn completely and cannot be rebuilt. She had made her choice when she decided that pregnancy was grounds for termination, when she prioritized short-term convenience over long-term ethics, when she chose to destroy someone's career rather than accommodate normal human life events. 5 years after that humiliating meeting in Rebecca's office, I stood on a stage accepting an award for Entrepreneur of the Year from the Regional Chamber of Commerce. The audience included competitors, clients, employees, and industry leaders who had watched Phoenix Creative grow from a kitchen table startup to a dominant player in the marketing industry. The woman who had fired me for getting pregnant had intended to eliminate a problem, to remove an inconvenience that didn't fit into her narrow vision of what an ideal employee should look like. Instead, she had created her most formidable competitor, someone who understood her weaknesses better than anyone, and who was motivated by a deep sense of justice to build something infinitely better than what she offered. She had turned a loyal employee into an entrepreneurial rival, transformed an internal resource into an external threat, and converted someone who might have remained at Zenith for decades into the architect of their ultimate destruction. The phoenix rises from ashes not because it was meant to burn, but because it refuses to let the fire define its destiny. Zenith Marketing Solutions had tried to burn me with their discrimination and cruelty, but they had only succeeded in forging me into something stronger, wiser, and more ruthless than I had ever been as their employee. They fired me for getting pregnant. I fired back with success so overwhelming that it obliterated everything they had built. And now, as I look toward the future with my daughter in my arms and my empire thriving, their nightmare has only just begun.